One of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite Christmas movies shows Ebenezer Scrooge in his nightgown and cap wandering a snowy, overcast London, accompanied by a robed, concealed figure. This one happens to be the musical version of Scrooge. Near the end of their time together, the ghost of Christmas yet to come brings him to the front door of his office building with a shiny plaque on front that still says Scrooge and Marley, even though Marley has been dead 7 years. The strange thing is, there is a huge crowd gathered all around. Tom Jenkins, the hot suit man, starts to speak. He's effusive in his praise for the man who has just done so much for them. They cheer. Then Scrooge himself, who can't be seen by any of them because this is the possible future, stands on a lower step and faces the crowd. He says something like, "I am overcome. I didn't know you cared so much." As he continues to speak, cheers rise occasionally from the crowd because Tom has a book that is a record of all their debts that he is tearing up, letting the pages fly. Then he moves aside as Scrooge's casket is brought out of the building and placed on the wheeled cart. The crowd begins to move as Tom hops on top and dances on the casket, singing these words. The girls can join me. "Thank you very much. That's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me." But all this is hidden from Scrooge, who continues to wax on and on about how he didn't know that people cared so much about him. And when he turns and watches the crowd, the cart, he does not see it at all. He doesn't see his casket. He doesn't see what it is bearing, that obviously is bearing his own body. And he is still wrapped in his own delight that he did something for all these people who just also happened to owe him money, and he never knew how much they loved him. Well, the irony, of course, is that the thing that he did was to die. And because they each owed him so much, when he died, he freed them from their debts to begin a new life. One of my colleagues calls this the barn guy story. It's found only in Luke. And it's often used in sermons to talk about stewardship. Like Scrooge, this man doesn't use his wealth of possessions to benefit anyone else. He doesn't even choose to fill his existing barns and give the excess away. No. Instead, he builds bigger barns to make sure that the extra crops are contained in buildings that belong to him. He sees the abundance produced by the land and given by God as only his to control, to worry about, and to celebrate, because it means that he can now stop working for many years, if not permanently. Unlike some people who must work until they die, he will be able to retire right now, relaxing, eating, drinking, and being merry. But here's a crucial thing. The dialogue he has, as I'm sure you heard, is only with himself. Listen again to the text. "And he thought to himself, 'What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.'" I hear no reference to we, and the only reference to you is when he talks to himself. This man lives in a closed system in which he and his soul are the only ones in the room. No doubt he feels entitled enough to speak with the only one whose opinions he values, his own. It is what a colleague calls living in a first-person universe. We also call it living in an echo chamber. No new information can get in which might cause him to see things differently. And although he has no relationship with any person, it seems, he might at least recognize that he has a relationship with the land especially with God, who has given the increase of blessings through the land. But there's no mention of gratitude to God, gratitude for fertile land, or for an especially good year. No, thank you very much, that's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me. Instead, as with Scrooge, his imminent death is a warning that his riches will benefit no one else. Our first lesson is from the book of Ecclesiastes, one of only 2 from that book in the whole lectionary cycle, which is interesting. We read in this text, "So I turned and gave my heart up to despair concerning all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes one who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave all to be enjoyed by another who did not toil for it." An interesting thought. Regarding inheritances, and this lesson as well as the lesson from Luke both mention them, I know that many of us have stories of families torn apart by disputes over inheritances when a parent dies. My grandma Pauline and her older sister Dorothy were like that. I knew Grandma's other siblings, but I don't think I ever met Dorothy, which I feel is a family tragedy. Not sure what the dispute was about, but it was never resolved as far as I know. But here is the thing. Sometimes we will be the beneficiaries of the gifts, the product of the wisdom and knowledge and skill of others, although we haven't worked for it ourselves. And sometimes others will benefit, although we have done the work. David Lose, one of my favorite theologians, muses about this text. How can one be rich toward God without also, and quite frankly first, being rich toward others? God, to paraphrase Martin Luther, needs neither our good works nor our wealth, but our neighbor does. So perhaps this parable is really about community, the community in which we find sustenance and comfort and help and hope, and the community in which and through which we experience life and life with God. Keep in mind, after all, that this whole parable is started by a break in the community, the central and primary community of society, a family. One brother comes seeking Jesus' intervention in the family squabble about an inheritance, and Jesus will have none of it. Recognizing that what should have been an occasion for celebration, remembrance, and gratitude, the giving and sharing of an inheritance, has instead been turned into a moment of division. Jesus then refuses to get involved directly, but instead tells the story of a man so enraptured with his good fortune that he ends up all alone. Lose continues, who was Jesus addressing, I wonder? The man who brought the complaint, the man's brother, the disciples, the crowds, all of us today? Yes. Yet all of these options, I'm particularly interested in how we hear Jesus' words today, he says. Because there is right now a profound and increasingly common message that we should not and cannot trust each other. That the world is increasingly dangerous and we should therefore be increasingly afraid. That kind of fear will not lead us forward. The frequently found biblical words, do not be afraid, are not offered simply to bolster our individual courage, but to make it easier for us to turn to one another with our fears and hopes and dreams and needs in order to form a community. The Bible warns us against fear because it's really hard to care for your neighbor and create a community when you are afraid. Don't get me wrong, he says. Community is not easy. It means putting up with people who disagree with you and annoy you and who have even hurt you. Forgiveness as well as trust is vital. But this is God's will that we not be alone. And I think this farmer who was rich in possessions but absolutely dirt poor in relationships never got that message. Lose concludes. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, we That word vanity, which is repeated 38 times in the book of Ecclesiastes, is an interpretation of the Hebrew word havel, which means literally vapor or mist or smoke. The substance that seems consequential but disappears. It might be helpful to think about a fire. Now, I don't know about you, but I have plenty of water and canned food, and I know where my flashlight and shoes are in case of an earthquake. But it's trickier to think about having to leave my home and all my possessions in case of a fire. Do you have any idea what you'd grab if you had to leave your home quickly? Any ideas?
The dog.
The cat? Okay, what else?
The dog.
The dog. Okay, all right. What else? What'd you say? My wife. Okay. If she's sleeping, she needs to be grabbed. Okay, what else? Pictures. Okay, all right. Well, for me, it would be the irreplaceable things. So, all the living creatures, whether family members or furry family members, memories documented in photos, and a few keepsakes. A few pieces of jewelry maybe to hand down to my daughters. My essential medications, I don't know how many of you are with me in that, the ones that are necessary for my life and health. And my purse, and my insurance card and driver's license and credit and debit cards. May I suggest that the things we would take with us as we needed to leave urgently are really the few essentials of our lives. And what would everything else be? Maybe everything else really is vanity, vapor, breath. Those things that we would miss, but that could go up in smoke as we turn instead to those things that really matter. Life and unity. The daily blessings of God, as we mentioned last week in the Lord's Prayer petition, give us this day our daily bread. For that is the other sin of the barn guy. He thinks only of himself and consults only with himself, but he also believes that he can amass enough grain and goods for many years, so he doesn't have to be dependent on God's daily provision. Thank you very much. That's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me. Those words warm Scrooge's miserly heart, although realistically, he will never hear them unless he makes drastic changes. For us, we need to remember that those words are words we say to God as well as each other, day to day, living in gratitude, as we depend upon each other in community. The community called together in Christ's name to share our abundance and serve others.